Zachary, thank you for joining us. Place in the historical context, will you, where we are? Because a lot of people think this crisis started on the 7th of October 2023 when Sky News and CNN turned up. But that's not true, is it?
That is not true. That is correct. I would trace the current escalation in violence to 2007, when Israel imposed a land, air, and sea blockade on the Gaza Strip. By 2010, the United Nations had determined that that blockade was illegal under international law because it imposed collective punishment on 2 million civilians in the Gaza Strip. It also was deemed illegal because it imposed punishment. Its goal was to punish the people of Gaza for having elected Hamas. And that blockade has led to a humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip. It has led 90% of people to lack access to safe drinking water. It has led 50% of people to be unemployed. It has led 80% of people to be dependent on food handouts. So we're talking about a food crisis, an employment crisis. There's also an electricity crisis, as you know. There's a mental health crisis. There's a public health crisis. In addition to all those crises, Israel launched 5 wars on the Gaza Strip and the people of Gaza over the past 16 years. And in those 5 wars, Israel slaughtered something like 3,000 innocent Palestinian civilians. And in every single one of those wars, human rights organizations like the UN and Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International and others deemed that Israel quite likely there's overwhelming evidence that Israel committed war crimes. Just to cite a few of the results of those investigations, in 2008, when Israel killed nearly 1,000 innocent Palestinians in Gaza, the Goldstone report, which was investigating human rights violations, determined that in 10 out of 11 investigated cases during which Israel bombed innocent civilians and killed innocent civilians, there was no justifiable military target identified. More or less the same conclusion in 2014. The UN found that in 15 cases in which it investigated bombings on civilian areas and residential neighborhoods, in 6 of the 15 cases, there was no identifiable military target. In other words, Israel indiscriminately targeted civilians in 2008, in 2014, and then in 2018, Israel committed a slaughter. You had tens of thousands of Palestinians marching to the wall, rejecting the blockade, demanding their right of return. And in response, Israel slaughtered 250 Palestinians over the course of the year and a half. And on one day alone, on May 14, 2008, Israel slaughtered 60 unarmed Palestinian protesters. It was a massacre. The world remained silent. And now, when the dead bodies are not just Palestinian, they're also Israelis, the world has woken up.
Well, of course, Judge Goldstone, himself Jewish, was subjected to a reign of intellectual terror against him for the temerity of investigating thoroughly, as he was charged to do, these crimes of which you speak. Now, according to Herzog, the president of Israel, a man we don't often hear from, just this week, he said that there are no innocent civilians in Gaza because, he said, they had elected Hamas. But the last election was in 2006, and half of the population of Gaza are children. So ipso facto did not vote for anybody, even if voting for someone was a valid reason for being slaughtered. What do you make of it?
Since 2006, Israel has decided that the people of Gaza should suffer the consequences for Hamas's actions, that it's the people who suffer. That was the stated intent of the blockade. When Israel first imposed the blockade on Gaza in 2007, its goal, according to Israeli leaders at the time, was to punish the people of Gaza for having elected Hamas. So there's nothing new about Israel's intent to hold innocent civilians responsible for the actions of their government. That's a war crime. It's a crime against humanity, and it's despicable. And the fact that we have most world governments declaring with hook, line, and sinker that they're backing these Israeli war crimes. You have Biden saying we are coming to your defense no matter what, at a time when the Israeli Defense Minister Gallant has declared that the people of Gaza will be denied food, they will be denied electricity, and they will be denied water. I mean, this is the United States government in full public declaring its support for genocidal actions. It's despicable.
Well, the water, as you will know, and I hope everyone now knows, the water has literally run out. There is now no water in Gaza. The pools that were there, the reserves that were there, are now exhausted. There is no water. There is no electricity. There is no internet. And there's a queue. I saw one queue at one baker, 500 people long, trying to buy bread. It's not going to be possible tomorrow or the next day even to find bread. This is biblical. This is an attempt at genocide, as you described it, but it's also flatly illegal to collectively punish people. This was established at Nuremberg in the war crimes trials. This is a breach of the Geneva Conventions, of the rule of war, of the law governing conduct in occupied territories, and so on. And yet, we've got all these also respectable, Armani-clad accomplices to murder in governments throughout the Western world. It's really come to something, hasn't it?
The current Israeli government has been on an ongoing campaign to ethnically cleanse Palestinians throughout all of historic Palestine. It's happening within Israel proper in the Negev, in the Naqab. It's happening in the West Bank, in the South Hebron Hills and Masaf Yatta, where 2,000 Palestinians face regular home demolitions and face ethnic cleansing. You have it happening in the Jordan Valley, where you have many Palestinian shepherding communities being harassed and forced out. Multiple villages have been depopulated just in the past few days since this assault on Gaza began. You have ethnic cleansing happening in the E1 zone between Jerusalem and the Jordan Valley. And now it's happening in Gaza as well, after the state of Israel declared they asked 1 million people to leave their homes in 24 hours. We're talking 7,000 people in the Shifa hospital in Gaza City asked to vacate. Where are they supposed to go? When they tried going when they tried going south, Israel bombed the convoys and killed 70 Palestinians who were fleeing in response to Israel's call to flee. So what you have now is one of the most significant humanitarian crises in recent memory, where millions of Palestinians are facing not just ethnic cleansing, but also genocide in the Gaza Strip. And I pray and hope that the world leaders come to their senses and call for restraint and call for a ceasefire and call both parties to stop the violence, because it's the people of Gaza who are paying the price for this.
If this doesn't happen, and China has called for it, Russia has called for it, King Hussein has called for it, Crown Prince MBS has called for it. If this ceasefire does not happen, and within hours, we're going to face a wider war in the region, aren't we?
I don't understand the thirst and hunger for revenge and war. You have 150 Israeli hostages who are dying by the day as Israel drops more bomb on them. Why is it that Israeli leaders don't love their own people as much as they have thirst and hunger for revenge and violence? What is happening now could spiral out of control. It has already dragged in Hezbollah. Israel has bombed airports in Syria and Lebanon. What we are talking about is the potential for escalation that could spiral out of control and lead to a regional war, if not a world war. I mean, this is incredibly dangerous, and it is incumbent upon every world leader, every Jewish leader, every Christian leader, every Muslim leader to call for the immediate ceasefire and end to hostilities, because otherwise things can easily spiral out of control and we could be facing a regional, if not global, war.
I'm sure you've impressed many, Zachary. How can people support your work? Where can they find you? What's the best place to hear and read what it is that you are saying?
You can find me on Twitter _Zach Foster, and I also have a newsletter It's called Palestine in Your Inbox, which you can find at PalestineNexus.com.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us, Zachary Foster, on the mother
Thank you.
of all talk shows.